All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am ready to discuss last night's Denver Nuggets win as the Nuggets defeats the Indiana Pacers. Final score 125-116. Pretty impressive game. Pretty impressive game from the Nuggets. I thought very highly of the way that they played. Thought very highly of the way that they just sort of approach things, and not always the case when you get embarrassed the way that they did on Saturday, but they bounced back and they did a good job and they won, and now they're going to start up a new win streak. Maybe we'll see what happens for the rest of this road trip, but it's going to be tough and they're going to have to figure it out. But I do think that this was a good start to what they needed to do, what they needed to accomplish. Always glad to see folks in the chat. Martin Hodl's always here, and he's always providing great support. MPJ in the dunker spot and AG spotting up in the corner. What is this world coming to? Credit to AG for his shooting this season. Absolutely. Been a lot of fun to watch him. 42 Ultra saying Mike is hesitating too much. If he can't get an open shot, then he's one of our best options for taking a contested one. Interesting take. And yeah, I mean, you probably have to get back to Michael Porter just doing Michael Porter things, but we'll get into it all. I have no doubt. Nolan says still the turnovers, for sure. Like, turnovers are still an issue, but Denver did force some more turnovers in this game, and I did note that. And Ozair is also here. Hello, Ryan. Can we talk about Nnaji, and can we use him at the 4 and Peyton at the 2? Interesting breakdown there. It is possible. Whether Michael Malone is willing to do that, whether the Nuggets can get to those lineups, is a different story altogether. But I will talk about it. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. Always appreciate the love and support. Really quickly, this podcast, as you know, it's brought to you by the good folks over at BetOnline, who are the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a first season fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline has your ultimate game day companion. They have a large selection of odds on everything from NBA to college basketball, NHL to UFC. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game that you play. BetOnline, the game starts here. Jeff Morton popping in. Pickaxe and Roll with local Scrivener Ryan Blackburn. Such a funny word in general. The oldest word that Jeff possibly knows. It's crazy that he has so much perspective and has to go all the way back to the 1400s when he was still alive to come up with the word Scrivener. That's fantastic. I was on the CSG show yesterday with Jeff, so make sure to go check that out. We had some interesting talks about competition and how the Nuggets are faring against teams that are above 500. Make sure to go check that out. All right, let's lock in here. Let's talk about this. The Nuggets took care of business in Indiana, 125-116 versus the Indiana Pacers. Pretty impressive game. Aaron, just going through the box score, it's pretty fascinating. Aaron Gordon with 25 points, Michael Porter with 19, Nikola Jokic with 18, Jamal Murray with 16, Christian Brown with 17. And then Zeke Nnaji off the bench with 14 points. We'll obviously get to him in a bit. But just a really balanced performance from Denver and a really impressive way for them to start this road trip where you don't always put your best foot forward at the beginning of a road trip, especially after you get embarrassed at home. But it was nice to see Denver take a business-like approach, traveling and changing 2 time zones and doing pretty well against a team that is also 32-24. Denver's now 38-20. It's hard to think about this. It's hard to really process this. Somebody sent yesterday that the Nuggets are the 4th best team in the NBA from a record perspective, and that blew my brain. I could not even fathom that, given the way that they started, given how things have gone. But the fact is that Denver's got the best or second best record since they lost to the Washington Wizards on December 7th. They have been a very good team. They've also just benefited from playing some pretty weak competition overall. We'll see if that can change, and we'll see if they can sort of translate some of those good things that they've done against bad teams to games that they've done against like teams like the Pacers here. So they play well. They do a really good job. Nikola Jokic sets a career high with 19 assists. Not sure where that 10th rebound went, but he only had 9 rebounds, 18 points, a Sombor double, a mean Sombor double to be clear. He was plus 17 in 39 minutes. In the 8 minutes that he didn't play, or 9 minutes, excuse me, DeAndre Jordan was out there. He was a minus 8. So Denver's bench didn't exactly fare well in this one, but the starters were fantastic. They were very, very good, and glad to see them kind of bounce back after what was a pretty ugly game on Saturday. Jokic especially, and I said this last night on Locked On, I want to reiterate it. I really loved his approach. I loved it. I don't need to see him score. We've seen him score. There's a lot of folks that saw what happened against the Lakers and then saw the first half of this game against the Pacers where he only took 5 shots or whatever, and they got worried. They got frustrated. They got concerned about how he was playing. And I just didn't feel that way. I feel like he's creating great shots. I feel like the way that he's playing and the way that he's operating, or at least the way that he did in this last game, was excellent. He did exactly what the team needed for him to win, and he doesn't have to make it about himself. And that's one of the things I wrote about last night too. The moment you really start to look off a whole bunch of other people and look for your own shot, that's the moment when you start making the game about yourself and not necessarily about the team winning. And Jokic is he's got so much conviction in what he believes and how he wants to go about this thing that he just continued to pass. He continued to set the table. It didn't necessarily mean that he had to shoot in order for the team to be successful. He doesn't need to be the guy to score. And I think this is good practice when they face the Lakers again. So often the Nuggets have been so used to Jokic dominating the paint, Jokic being the guy in the paint and creating everything for the opposition. That doesn't have to be the case all the time. And I think he showed it in this game where, yeah, he did take more shots. He took 14 shots as opposed to 7, but he was much more efficient. He was much more effective. And the 19 assists stand out like crazy. So credit to him for continuing to play the right way, and credit to the Nuggets for taking advantage of the opportunities that he created. That's the other point of this. Denver did a much better job of taking advantage of the good stuff. And I'm glad that they were able to do it. Aaron Gordon was one of those guys, especially 25 points for AG in 24 minutes. He dealt with foul trouble for much of this game. But when he wasn't dealing with foul trouble, the dude was cooking. 11 of 17 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3, only 1 free throw. It's funny, only 4 free throw attempts for the entire starting unit. 1 for Gordon, 3 for Christian Brown. Then you had guys off the bench. Pretty much everybody off the bench had some free throws, but Denver as a team only shot 14. This was a shot-making clinic. This was something that they did. They just dominated the Pacers inside, and there was nothing that the Pacers could really do about it. And Gordon was a big reason why. 25 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Did have a couple turnovers and did have those 4 fouls, but still was just dynamic as a shot maker and dynamic as a creator for himself and for other people. Really liked what I saw from him. And he continues to show just what he can do on just doing everything that he needs to do for this Nuggets team as a scorer. And as a shot maker, he's shooting 43% from 3. Think about that. 43% is crazy. And the fact that he's able to do that on a relatively consistent basis, that is, I think, a pretty significant factor for Denver kind of recovering and figuring some stuff out. Yes, he dealt with the calf strain for a while. Yes, he's still going to be kind of in and out of the lineup at times. He's still on the injury report and getting treatment pretty much every single game, in between every single game. But I've been very impressed with how he has shot the ball, how we saw it early on in the season, in the preseason, where we're like, hey, his jumper looks great. And then he went down and it kind of got forgotten and lost in the weeds. And there are some other things that he's struggling with for sure. Shot making is not one of them. The actual jumper has been fantastic. So Keep shooting, Aaron. The best thing that he can do for the Nuggets is to continue to space the floor, continue to get as comfortable as possible taking those shots, because we know what he can do as a finisher on the interior, especially when he's got a mismatch. So glad to see him. It has been kind of a role reversal with him and Michael Porter. I saw somebody tweet that or share that in the comments earlier. So pretty cool stuff from him. And then you've got Michael Porter, especially 19 points, 11 rebounds, 9 of 16 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. Again, like the first shot that he hit was this crazy step back 3 off the dribble, which was pretty impressive over Miles Turner. But then he didn't make another 3 the entire game. The most that he did was he was getting to the rim a lot, but he also had some nice step back 2s and getting to the mid range and doing some impressive things there. But for the most part, it's just him continuing to be big, playing at 6'10". I noted this in the preview yesterday that the matchups that Indiana has against him are Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin if he switches out, who's big but not a good defender, Benedict Mathurin, Ben Shepherd. If he gets switched, Tyrese Halliburton, like Andrew Nembhard. This is not a great mix. And the only 2 guys that were pretty big on that team that could have a chance of guarding him were Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam. And those guys were very busy guarding Jokic and Gordon. So Porter had a good opportunity here, and I'm glad to see him take advantage of it. He is somebody that the Nuggets, of course, need, but the way that he gets himself going from the perimeter, it's not always about him shooting. A lot of times when he goes into a mini slump, he will get to the rim first, and he'll have a couple of those games where he's just like 8 of 12, like he was in this game, 8 of 12 from 2-point range. And then he works on the mid-range jumper, and then when he gets to a comfortable place, he gets back out to the 3-point line and then hits some big shots. He is a good enough 3-point shooter that I'm not really worried about that. But there are times where he's going to struggle from that distance. And the best way for him to manage that is to get some easier shots, get some baskets near the rim, get some mid-range jumpers, and then work his way back out from 3. He's pretty good at it. And Christian Braun. Christian Braun is another guy that we'll talk about now and then kind of take a break after that. Christian Braun was struggling finishing with the left hand. Left-handed finishes around the rim were not great to begin this game, but then he just decided to, hey, let's just use the right hand, and he shot 7 of 11 from the field overall. Didn't take a single 3, but got to the free throw line 3 times. 17 points, 8 rebounds, 1 steal. Again, like Tyrese Halliburton was the guy who guarded him because Andrew Nembhard spent most of his time guarding Jamal Murray. And Halliburton's not a good defender. There are some things that he does, and he jumped the passing lanes a couple of times in this one. I think he had a couple of the steals against Jokic. But overall, when he wasn't roaming off of Christian and when he wasn't gambling, Christian was taking advantage of that matchup in a big way. And I'm glad to see him. He was big bodying Halliburton a little bit. Hallie looked like he looked a little soft out there at times, not going to lie. And Christian, I think, like he got the high percentage option of going to the rim, finishing over the top of Halliburton, and getting to the free throw line when he had an opportunity to. So I liked the way that he played. I know that there are some folks that would like to see him take more threes, and I understand that. I do. But I also know that in this game in particular, the Pacers had nothing. They had nothing for Denver's paint attack, and the numbers bear that out. 74 points in the paint for the Nuggets in this last game. That is a crazy number, but it's also not surprising. Like just thinking about the way that they handle their stuff, how they play in a lot of these situations. They were always going to try to attack the paint in these situations, and I'm glad that they were able to be as successful as they were. They shot 8 of 21 from 3 as a team. Not a surprise. Not a surprise to me. By the way, 74 points in the paint. It is not in the top 7 of the points of the paint numbers that they've had so far. Actually, it's funny. So they've had 88 points in the paint, 84 points in the paint, and then 5 separate times they've had 76 points in the paint in a game. And kind of crazy, 6 of those top 8 are, and then you have 74. 6 of those top 8 are on the road. A lot of them are against bad teams, though. So Denver's going to have to find a way to do that against better teams. Not a lot of teams that they can do that against and still win. So they're going to have to, again, like points in the paint it's like the devil's fruit. You take it because it's so alluring and it's so good. It is probably something that the Nuggets, like, it's an easy fix for what is going to be a more difficult challenge in the playoffs. And so I hope that Denver can continue to find more opportunities to shoot. I love that Aaron Gordon was shooting. I love that Jamal Murray went 4 of 4 from 3, but he only took 4 threes. And one of the reasons why was because, one, the Pacers adjusted as much as they could for his three-point shooting, but 2, they didn't need to shoot them, so they didn't. The problem that Denver's going to run into is they're going to run into, like, when they need to shoot them, they won't be ready to. And so I hope that they continue to find opportunities to space the floor as much as possible. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to chat more about the bench units. We'll chat about, I actually want to share a stat about Jokic's assists, and we will do more on the other side. We will be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. Boyan comes in with the super chat here, asking how hard is it for Michael Porter and Julian Strawther to show hands, keep up on D. Uh, always a challenge, especially when you've got the wing players that are offensive minded guys. Sometimes those guys are definitely, like, they are the ones that lag behind. What I will say is that Mike, when he is focused, when he is locked in, he does a much better job of that. If you remember back to the 2023 playoffs, he wasn't a liability in those games. He was, like, just a reasonable defender. And when you're a reasonable defender, then you're not somebody that can be attacked on a consistent basis. Julian's getting attacked, and everybody knows it. Everybody understands it. I thought that in this last game, there was a possession that he had, I believe, against, it was either Matherin or Nemhard. It was one of those two, I think. And he forced to travel. He stayed down. There was shot fakes over and over and over again. And then somebody, I think it was Matherin, who traveled, and just a really impressive defensive play. And when you get those things, it's the progress in real time that you're starting to see. Julian's so nervous about all of this. He wants to stay on the floor so badly, and he wants to play defense. Like, this isn't a thing where he doesn't care about it. He wants to be out there. He wants to be on the floor. He knows that this is his ticket to do so. And when you have guys like that who are just struggling, I just think he's going to eventually get it. But it is difficult for those guys to make it happen. So thank you for the super chat, Boyan. Really appreciate it. All right. Let's talk about, Murray real quick. He went 4 of 4 from 3, had 16 points. He also got into foul trouble, had 3 fouls with about 10 minutes left in the second quarter. It's funny, he finished with 3 fouls, but Denver played him about 22 minutes in the second half, so they did make up for it a little bit. But he tied for the team lead in plus minus with Jokic at plus 17, and he was a positive factor for what the Nuggets were doing. Couple odd turnovers. He had the first turnover of the game off of a bad pass, trying to pass it to Jokic, which probably gave some Nuggets fans PTSD. But overall, like, the shot making from Murray was great. He took a heat check at the beginning of the second quarter and, like, just hit nothing but the bottom. And the way that he plays, it gives everybody, I think it gives everybody that confidence that, like that gear is of course there on a consistent basis. Like Murray shot the ball well against the Lakers. He shot the ball well against the Charlotte Hornets. He shot the ball well, obviously, against Portland in the final game before the break. He is shooting extremely well. I believe he's up to 40% from three now. So credit to him for turning this year around. He was not looking good for the vast majority of the first 2 months of the season, and now he is in a very good place. So glad to see it. He looks great, and it's been awesome to watch for sure. Marco says Murray's shot is back, but still can't beat people off the dribble. Will have issue with bigger physical guards. I disagree. Like, honestly, Nembhard is so, like, he's a smaller guard and he's very quick. He's a very good defender. And the fact that Murray wasn't beating him off the dribble, I'm not surprised by that. Like, some of these guys are going to get their wins every now and then. And Murray got his win early. And are there going to be guys that prevent Murray from getting a bunch of separation off the dribble? Sure. But I'm really, really not worried about Murray's ability to create separation in a game like this. I'm just not. But either way, let's go to the bench. We got to talk about Zeke Nnaji, right? Like, he's the next guy to talk about. Because Aaron Gordon got into foul trouble, he played 24 minutes. Zeke Nnaji played all of the other minutes that Aaron Gordon did not play. They never overlapped, I don't think. 24 minutes for Zeke Nnaji, 14 points on 6 of 8 from the field, 1 of 1 from 3, 1 of 2 from the line, had 3 offensive rebounds, did have 0 defensive rebounds, and that is notable to me. But he had a couple blocks and did a really nice job overall of just connecting what the Nuggets needed to do on both the offensive and defensive end. When he was on the offensive end, he was finishing possessions, he was cutting, he was getting into offensive rebounding position, and then he had a nice kick out for 3. He had multiple times, or at least one, where he had his foot on the line for a jumper. So he actually did shoot better on his jumpers than I think 1 of 1 from 3 really entails. But he did a really nice job overall of staying comfortable, staying confident in those situations. And I love it, man. Like, I genuinely did not think that he was going to play again. At this point, you know that with the contract that he had, he was going to be around. Denver couldn't trade him at the deadline, whether they tried to that hard or not. And the best way for somebody to kind of play themselves into the ability to be tradable and to be like available is to just play well. And the best scenario for Denver was obviously, like, it wasn't that Zeke was getting traded. It was that Zeke just played well. And like, he has shown a skill set here that is pretty comparable to Aaron Gordon in some ways, where you've got the defensive guy, the switch everything guy, who does a great job on the perimeter and switching out onto different players. He can help at the rim, do some different things there. Not like a tremendous rim protector or anything like that, but he can do some things just playing great, solid defense. And then the shot making and the ability to catch the ball and finish, whether that's around the rim or just taking some long 2s or 3s, it's been very impressive. So I've loved seeing that from Zeke. He deserves a bunch of credit for his ability to stick with it, his ability to just be a factor for what the Nuggets have needed. And the most important thing for Denver is that they don't lose the advantage here. Like, he's been a great opportunity for him to shine. And I'm curious to see how the Nuggets handle it when other guys get back healthy. Like, is Zeke going to keep playing every night? Is Peyton Watson going to take his spot? Are the Nuggets going to change up their rotation a little bit? I'm very curious. And there's a lot of comments here. There's a lot of folks talking about, like, Peyton Watson is a 3, Peyton Watson is a 2. I don't think Peyton Watson is a 2. He doesn't have the shooting ability to handle the 2. Like, that's definitely not a thing. But there are situations where, with the right personnel out there, he could play the 2, and Zeke could play the 4. Like, hypothetically, you play a Jamal Murray, Peyton Watson, Michael Porter, Zeke Nnaji, Nikola Jokic lineup, and you're doing okay. Like you're certainly going to be fine on that front. Now, the offensive decision making there is going to be interesting, especially when teams over-index on Murray and Jokic. But I'm curious to see how they handle it. I'm curious to see what Michael Malone decides to do, and if this is a sustainable thing for Zeke, or if he kind of fades back into the background when everybody gets healthy. But I'm fascinated by what Peyton Watson's going to provide when he comes back, and how the Nuggets decide to deploy him. Personally, I would go with a 10-man rotation. I wouldn't play an all bench unit, but I would go with a 10-man rotation, and I would try to play 5-minute stretches for some of these guys. Maybe not play them all at the same time, but just try to pick and choose when the best opportunity is for those guys to play. So we will see. Ken Patterson says, Zeke finally playing at his natural position. Why they tried to make him a 5 baffles me. First of all, he was drafted to play the 5. End of story. Like, as somebody who was in that building and who understands the thought process of Tim Connolly, not even Calvin Booth, but Tim Connolly, they drafted him to play the 5. They did not draft him to play the 4. And there were opportunities to, like, he did play the 4. He did play more of a perimeter position early on in his career. But the thought process was always that he was going to be their backup 5. And he just never developed that skill set. He never developed the consistent rebounding or the ability to really manage that defensively, but also manage it offensively. He was no, like, you guys are wilding. Like, I have always thought this, and it is very important for guys, especially when the team has a plan, when the team has, like, they doing what they're doing. So much of the late 2010s was about playing small ball, being able to switch everything in guard. Zeke Nnaji was a great example of a player that would have functioned well against a team like the Golden State Warriors, would have been able to switch and guard and do those things against a guy like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and maybe not Kevin Durant, but like having to switch out and guard and play in situations like that, where you're playing a very perimeter-based style. The NBA has changed a little bit since Zeke Nnaji was drafted. Every position across the board is now bigger. Everybody is stronger. It's more traditional, like kind of back 2012-ish than when it was 2016 to 2019. And I genuinely believe, like, and I understand Denver's thinking here and Michael Malone's thinking here, that making Zeke into a 5 was the wrinkle that the Nuggets were going to be able to give, because, like, Jokic was a paint-bound, like slow, plodding center. And pairing him with a perimeter-based 5-out style that Zeke Nnaji could have operated, that was the thought process. It's not a crazy thing. It's why Aaron Gordon at the 5 has been such a factor for the Nuggets. I'm not like, I don't, just because Zeke hasn't handled it well doesn't mean that it was the wrong decision to try to do. I think that that's more on Zeke than it was on anybody else, personally. But that doesn't mean that you can't change the opinion now. And I think that Denver, at this point, they've tried it. The center spot didn't work. And now at this point, it's just different. Zeke was drafted in 2020 and Plumlee was already gone. But what happened was, like, Zeke ultimately played in 2021 and 2022. He was more of a 4, of course. And like that's just the spot where he was able to get on the floor. Like, JaVale McGee was the backup 5. JaMychal Green and Paul Millsap were playing more backup 5 at that point. Isaiah Hartenstein was playing backup 5. And yeah, Denver was probably wrong about this, but it doesn't make the plan that they had initially bad. I think that was more of a Zeke Nnaji thing than a Denver Nuggets thing, personally. But now that they have an opportunity to pivot, they can, and they should. And They got to do it what the best thing is for their team. And before, it was trying to make Zeke Nnaji a 5 because that's where the opportunity was. Now, you just have to get good players, and you just have to play good players in their spots. And we'll ultimately see what happens and how that continues to develop. Don't Tell Santa Cruz asks, how do you feel about Booth picking Hunter Tyson over Tumani Kamara? What do you want me to say, man? Like, obviously, picking Tumani Kamara would have been a better choice. It's hard to know that. It's hard to know in the moment. There was a reason why Tumani Kamara was the 53rd pick in the draft or whatever, is because not a lot of people believed in his skill set then, including Calvin Booth. So I'm not like, this is not a big deal. I wouldn't think too much of that. That draft was, like, in retrospect, Denver probably should not have traded. Like, they had the 40th pick or so in that draft. They managed to get the 29th, 32nd, and 37th pick. Probably a little bit too many maneuverings in that draft. If they had just been able to get Julian Strother and maybe Jalen Pickett, then that would have been just fine. Maybe you could save a resource for a future draft, which obviously Denver clearly needs right now. Okay. And finally, for this game, let's go back to Indiana. Russell Westbrook, not a great game from him. I was not impressed with the way that he handled things. 2 of 8 from the field, 0 of 3 from 3, 3 of 4 from the line. That's one thing, but 7 points, 5 assists, 3 turnovers, had some bad fouls. Mostly the 3-shot foul that I'm thinking of. The way that he has, like, he's still trying to find his rhythm, clearly, and find his ability to impact the game. Denver, without him, played their best basketball. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that it was super sustainable because they're playing it against pretty bad teams, but they did find the way that they were trying to play without Russ. And now Russ is trying to come back in, and especially playing a 6-man role as opposed to starting, he's trying to rediscover how he can be impactful. And I don't blame him for struggling. Like, it's not a denigration of anything. But he's got to rediscover what he does. The Nuggets have gone with Christian Braun as the starting shooting guard, and I genuinely believe that was the right decision, both then and now, because he is the present and future of what the Nuggets are going to keep doing. And his development, I think, is more important. Like, given that he and Russ are giving about the same in terms of impact, and Christian might even be higher, I'm just not surprised that the Nuggets went with him, because he is somebody that will continue to get better. And I think with Jokic, like, his chemistry is very important too. Like, it's not just Russ and Jokic. They will have their own time, and Russ is going to play a whole bunch of minutes with Jokic over the course of the rest of the season. And Michael Malone could still change the lineup. So I'm not going to sit here and say that everything is set in stone. But I will say that I think that Russ has to continue to find ways to adapt. He has to find ways to now assist Jamal Murray now that he's kind of back into a good place. Russ did a good job of kind of picking up the slack for Murray while he was really struggling early on in the season. And Russ deserves credit for that. Now, at this stage of the season, Russ has to play a slightly different role than he played early on, where he was a major factor. He's not going to be a major factor, I think, for the rest of this regular season and playoffs. He has to go back to fitting in some ways, but he can do that in his own unique way by standing out. Like, it doesn't have to just be, hey, pass up the ball and do not do anything. It's not get off the ball the entire time. He can find ways, but he's just got to rein it in just a little bit more, be a little bit more cautious with some of the passes that he throws, some of the dribble opportunities that he has, and just slow down in some ways. And that will, I think, help him. It will help the Nuggets. But we'll see. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that, and maybe he will get back to playing like the 15-point, 10 assist kind of nights, and maybe that'll be a little bit different. We'll see. All right, folks. I think that is going to do it for this episode. Again, good team win. This was a good opportunity for Denver. They got back on the high horse. They did what they needed to do to kind of turn some things around. And I'm glad to see that they managed themselves reasonably well. Never easy to come back from a beatdown like they had and like just immediately start playing good basketball, but they did. And I'm glad that they were able to make it work. So, look, we'll see what happens for the rest of this road trip. They've got another tough 3 games. Oh, actually, before I go, and I screwed this up multiple times. I sent out a tweet last night about Jokic's stats, about Jokic's 19 assists. And I think it was a pretty impressive stat list that he put together. Jokic's 19 assists, they tie Wilt Chamberlain for the second most assists by a center in NBA history. Here is the list. Wilt Chamberlain leads at 21. Wilt Chamberlain and Jokic, they are tied at 19. That's the second most all time. Jokic is by himself with 18 assists. He did it twice in like 17 assists. Chamberlain did it once. Jokic did it 3 times. 16 assists. Chamberlain did it twice. And then you have Jokic. And then you have Domantas Sabonis as well. So pretty impressive. Guys, yes, Wilt had 21 assists, and Wilt also had 19 assists. That's what I said. All right. That is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button on the way out. I'll talk to you guys on Thursday.